Welcome, I'm Paul, this is Dave. Today I have 15 Glitch in the Matrix and paranormal stories for you, and a couple just creepy ones too. Let's get to it. Case file number 3025, written by Baby Bats 66. The Jogger, the Kid, and the Street of Nowhere. I think about this story often. I like to blame the fact that it was dark that night, and I was so angry I must have gotten confused. I moved in with my boyfriend in 2023. We lived in a nice elderly couple's basement, although the basement was pretty dingy. It was nice to be away from my abusive mother. My boyfriend and I argued a lot. We moved in together really fast in our defense. We're fine now. One night, we argued and I left. I suffer from bipolar disorder, and leaving to clear my mind is the best option sometimes to avoid escalation. It was late, but not that late, maybe around 8 p.m. We lived in a suburb, houses everywhere. I felt safe. I grew up in the projects, so living around houses felt nice to me. I was confident I'd be fine. It wasn't the nicest neighborhood, but a lot nicer than what I was used to. I walked for a while, trying to calm myself. I walked and walked, all recognizable. I passed houses that were landmarks for me, all things I've seen before. Because I didn't know the neighborhood that well, I tried to walk as straight as possible, so I easily knew how to get back. Soon I passed a grocery store, one I had never seen before. It was right on the corner of a cross-section. All of a sudden, things started to look different. The houses got grander and large, so damn big. Elaborate, large glass homes that were practically mansions. Christmas decor littered the streets. It was around September, a little early for Christmas decor, but nothing I hadn't seen before. I remembered it was September because I wasn't wearing a sweater and I was fine. I just had on a graphic tee. I walked more and more and suddenly the streets branched out wider. My neighborhood was in the suburbs, but wasn't by any means lavish. I was honestly so in awe of their homes, I walked and looked around. I remember a man jogged past me once. I looked into the homes and saw women just folding laundry, usual stuff. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Soon I walked and I was suddenly near a lake. Gorgeous lakefront homes everywhere. The streets were completely empty, except for that man that jogged past me earlier. I walked further, away from the lake, and turned on a dark block. All the streetlights were off except one. I suddenly felt a little uneasy. The streetlights being off scared me. So I walked quicker. I turned around, a little paranoid, and noticed a younger kid behind me, maybe a preteen. He was also minding his own business. It was like nobody really noticed me. The kid was just standing there, not really doing anything. Here's the worst part. I don't remember how I got back. The last thing I remember is the streetlights. All I know is I must have kept walking and walking. The next thing I remember was being back in my own neighborhood, because I was suddenly in front of a house I did recognize. They played loud music while the whole family danced in the front yard. I smiled and walked past them to my basement. Told my boyfriend about it a few days later. He had no idea what I was talking about. My boyfriend grew up in this neighborhood. He'd lived here all his life since he came to America. I told him to look for the grocery store one day when we were driving, and I couldn't find it. I even told him about the grand houses and the lake. He said there was none. Absolutely no bodies of water anywhere near the suburb. Not very scary, but it's something I think about. We just joke and say, I was so angry I must have walked really far and came back. In reality, I was only gone for about 30 minutes. I even opened my Google Maps looking for the nearest lake, but couldn't find any nearby. This situation honestly just confused me more than anything else. The more I read stories like this, the more I'm convinced that maybe it's not a space-time portal, but there are areas of the world where, at least temporarily, if you cross them, maybe it's ley lines related, but the membrane between universes is fragile, and you can cross over temporarily, then when you walk back again, you go back to your original universe. It's not like a connection to the broad of the multiverse, every single universe. It's just one that is really close nearby. but not necessarily in a physical distance, because often these universes tend to be vastly different to the original one. So you're just walking, and not far, 30 minutes. If there's no lake nearby, then it is literally impossible to be anything else. I don't think it could be an actual space-time portal, because you wouldn't intersect it going back the same way. So yes, it's confusing when you experience it, but nothing nefarious. It's not like a spirit took you over or kidnapped you to a different universe. Just a quiet stroll to a different place. Case file number 3026, written by Smooth Maintenance 35. Between jacket and shirt. Between then and now. I was going through a nasty divorce. As a result, I ended up staying in hotels and paying cash to keep my stalker ex from finding me. Eventually, peace officers saw the truth and arrested her and dropped a peace bond. But I digress. I would carry a money clip with me, often $1,500 to $2,000. I went to sleep one night with the money clip, my car keys, cell phone, and wallet on the nightstand beside the hotel bed. I woke up and placed the money clip and my wallet in a zip inside the pocket of my jacket. Later that day, the wallet was still in the zipped up jacket, but no money clip. I literally cut open the jacket. Not there. No tears in the pocket lining. I also ripped the hotel room apart. Nothing. I had a limited amount of clothes in my suitcase. Tore that apart. No trace. I went to my employer, and I had access to a huge parking area inside. I tore the vehicle apart too. Cleaned it, shampooed the carpets and seats while the car was torn apart. The money clip had vanished. Several months later, I was entering another hotel. I was driving a rental SUV. I had just had a few suits and dress outfits dry cleaned. They were on hangers inside plastic wrappers to protect them. As I gathered all my stuff out of the rental vehicle, grabbed the suits, etc., I was trying to carry too much and dropped some of the dress shirts on the ground. Please keep in mind that these dress shirts were new to me a few weeks previously. Lo and behold, the money clip fell out of the front pocket in one of the dress shirts. It still blows my mind almost 10 years later. There are many details I have not shared here, but trust me, bizarre, truly weird. So I think this isn't so much a disappearing object where it's vanishing to a different place. I think it is literally some objects can dematerialize from the server, and their code instruction to re-render when observed is either corrupted and another server doesn't step in with the correct code to reset it until much later. I think that's what's going on. It happening to money sucks, but at least it was reset eventually. Case file number 3027, written by Western Downtown 4083. The Road That Skipped a Day. I travel back and forth across the country a lot, from the West Coast to the Midwest. Always go the same route, stop at the same stops. Been doing so for a little over a decade. Leave at 10 a.m. from the West Coast and arrive on the third day in the late afternoon, 5-7-ish each time. On one trip from west to east, I was a day and a half drive away from my destination. Stopped at my usual gas station to fill up and call ahead and let people know I was on schedule. Got back in the vehicle and got back onto the interstate. A few minutes later, I passed a sign that had the name of my destination on it, and my thought was, how have I made this trip this many times and never noticed there's another town with my town's name? A couple minutes past that sign and I see off-ramps for a city ahead. My city. As this was the second day of a 3-day trip, somehow I gained more than 24 hours. I pulled into my destination, and my friends were shocked. I have no missing memory. The phone showed I did place the call in Nebraska, and it was 40 minutes prior to me pulling into my destination, corroborated by a friend's phone. The math says I would have to have been driving over 300 miles per hour non-stop, which obviously I wasn't. I have searched for an answer for a couple years now. The only thing I can find is about people missing or losing time. Even AI can't find me anything on gaining time. It happened once more, months later, on a trip from east to west. There's a town sign that when I see it, I know I have 2.5 hours to go, and I'm done with the drive. I pass the sign, and not 5 minutes later, I'm pulling into town. Again, no gaps in memory, and no logical explanations. hasn't happened since that trip. I've made this trip roughly 100 times or more. These instances are not the only illogical or improbable or impossible things I've witnessed. Okay, the reason I love this one is, yeah, it's a space-time portal, almost certainly, but this one is special because it transported you extremely far. We're talking 1,000 miles, maybe, or more? Something wild like that. I think the furthest I've ever heard, at least where someone is consciously aware of it, I think there was one story where someone's car was ported from the US somewhere to Iraq or Afghanistan or Iran or something like that, very far away across the Atlantic. But outside of that, and I don't think they were in the car when it happened, this one is the most pronounced, where you were in the car itself while it happened. So, space-time portals can port you very far, and even the second time, where you save like 2 hours, that one's not as uncommon, but it's still notable that it happened to you twice. And yeah, I wonder what would happen if this occurred to a semi-truck, like a trailer. They're driving all the time. They have millions of miles, many of them. But I don't think I've heard of a truck having a glitch in the Matrix like this. Maybe the drivers just don't notice? Or maybe their vehicle is too large, so it doesn't maybe it has to fully intersect within the confine of the portal. Like, what is the shape of a portal? Is it a circle? An oval? A square? Because you don't see it, it's hard to say. I think, yeah, there was one instance where people were seeing the portal described as circular. But I think those only occur when they're unstable, so maybe the actual shape when it's stable is different. Pure speculation on this case, but I think you probably have to fully intersect through it for it to port you. Otherwise, you just pass through it like nothing's there. Case file number 3028, written by Storyteller Eclipse. The promise he broke without words. My father decided to try to win my mom back on Mother's Day. They hadn't gotten divorced yet, but had lived separately for several years at this point. I went with my mom because my dad was a narcissist. When he offered to help us move our stuff into a new house, I was reluctant because I knew that if he knew where we lived, he could try something dangerous. I had him say, on camera, that I would not visit the property without our permission. That way, I could prove that he said it. In the past, he's done hurtful things and then just gaslit me and my mom into believing that we both just remembered wrong. That's how good he was at playing that card. Fast forward to several years living together far away from him, and we couldn't be happier. My mother confided in me other abuse that had happened before I was even born, and other abuse I was too young to remember. On Mother's Day, it was break time in my college, and I was sleeping in. I woke up to the sound of my mother urgently whispering my name. When I opened my eyes, my blood froze in my veins. The look she gave me, the tiny beginning of tears at the edges of her eyes, the fragile paleness of her skin. From the look on her face alone, I knew he was here. All she could manage to say was, "He has flowers," looking into the house to see if we were home. His expression was not one of love. I managed to watch him closely without him seeing me, through the window, while my mom hid in my room, the room furthest away from the front door. All three of us were deadly silent in a game of the most terrifying hide-and-seek I've ever been in. After 15 minutes to a half an hour, he gave up and left the flowers there, stopping back to his truck and leaving to go back to his house hours away. I've experienced more terrifying things in my life, but that's definitely the most eerie situation I've ever been in. Just on the verge of something terrible happening, while not being directly in danger. Yeah, like you described a narcissist. The thing is, sometimes they can camouflage so well, you don't realize who they are until much later on in a relationship. And that's when they spring the trap on you, because you're already connected, you know them, they know you, and it can feel very hard to separate yourself from them. I'm glad your mom got away, and yeah, I would move again. Case file number 3029, written by Garden Twined, 17 Years of Wisdom. My roommate's cat was over 17 years old, pretty standoffish. Bit me once gently to tell me not to pet her, sleep on my back or butt a handful of times for warmth. Would wait for me to feed her when I got back from work and roommate was gone for days. A very smart and practical madam. Smartest cat I've ever met. One day, roommate's gone, front door's closed, Her room with a little litter and food is closed and locked. I'm getting ready for work and she jumps up on me to get to eye level, and I knew she was trying to telepathically communicate with me, and I was getting none of it. I apologized and told her I don't understand. She's gonna have to show me. She had to poop. She went into one of my empty, cheap, frozen grocery bags. I think she was asking me to let her outside. Fortunately for her, I found it, put it in a baggie, and told my roommate to buy her some cheap dewormer for the poor lady. She never tried that again. Jumping into my lap and getting her eyes level with me like that. That cat was convinced she could talk to me telepathically, and I completely fell through on that. Overall, I picked up on my cat's intent pretty well, but they've also never had the sense to keep a puke anywhere but a clean space of floor, not the bed or laundry, and always had access to the litter box. Case file number 3030, written by Ambient10. Dubai at a different time. A few years back, me, my sister, and my dad went to Dubai for a holiday. We were walking along the waterfront at 12 a.m. It had those boat-shaped restaurants attached to the cliffs, or you could also rent boats. Everything was closed as it was late, but the waterfront was well lit. We passed one of those boat-style restaurants, and it was completely closed. Dark inside, empty and quiet. My sister and I walked up close to it and sat on the benches by it for a bit, while my dad continued walking. We caught up with my dad. We walked the short path for maybe 10 more minutes. As we walked back, the same linear path to get to our car, back up to the exact same spot. But suddenly, the same restaurant was fully lit up, packed with people, blasting loud music, and staff outside calling people in and handing out menus. The same boat, same sign outside, the same bench that was by it. We were all just standing there, flabbergasted. I even asked the front staff if they just opened. She looked at me strangely and said no. My sister, father, and I all saw the same thing. In the span of 10 minutes, the place went from totally shut down to looking like it had been open and lively all night. So you were all in a different universe or seeing a different one and then came back to the original. So it's again back to that thin membrane, most often intersected just as pedestrians walking around. I guess it could happen to cars too, but those seem to interact more with space-time portals. And if we're talking about different universes, I mean, it could just be sight. You're not physically there, you're just seeing it. It's like information encoded into your brain. Like, what is seeing? Seeing is just inputs into your eyeballs, then converted to electrical signals interpreted by your brain, as Morpheus would say. So yeah, if there's information from a different universe being fed into your eyeballs for some reason, not the input from your original universe, maybe it's just a mix-up. Maybe it's not fully crossing over to a different universe, just the information from it being fed into your eyeballs, where you're not supposed to receive that version of the universe's information. Case file number 3031, written by Skalangdik. A glitch made of copper. So, I bought some items at a local Dollar General, and upon receiving the change from the cashier, I noticed a strange penny. I'm a sucker for rare coins, and it turns out this was a 1902 Indian head penny. Not super rare per se, but I've never had one, so I was pretty excited, and set it aside for safekeeping. When I got to my house after leaving the store, I did something with the penny. The reason I say something is because I truly could not remember where I put it. This will make sense in a minute. I was getting ready to go to sleep and the penny was put to the back of my mind. The next day I woke up, went and fed my cats, and went to a friend's house for a few hours. Whenever I returned home, I started my usual routine of weekend cleaning. I started a load of clothes, I vacuumed my room, and I made my bed. Making my bed part is important because this is where it gets super weird. So after I finished vacuuming, I started to dust my surfaces and suddenly remembered my penny. I had wanted to place it on my display table for my selected items, shark teeth, gemstones, feathers, rare coins, but I could not remember for the life of me where I put the penny. I began to worry that I left the penny in my clothes that I washed, and it was lost to the dryer gods, or worse, accidentally vacuumed it. I started to search all of my drawers, normal places I put my rare items, nothing. I began to retrace my steps coming home from the store, and I figured I must have accidentally dropped it at my friend's house. I was about to give him a call when I noticed something right on top of my freshly made bed. The penny was sitting directly in the middle of my bed, on top of the covers. It didn't make any sense. I had thoroughly cleaned my room, and in the process of making my bed, I always pull all of the blankets and sheets all the way off, shake them out well, and layer them back in their proper order. The truly surprising fact was that it was seemingly suspended in some quasi-Schrodinger's penny situation, where it didn't exist until I began to search for it, at which point it materialized directly on top of my bed in the most obvious spot. I literally laughed and made a point to commit the whole situation to memory. It was a subtle but personally significant situation that really made me reinvigorated in my quest for understanding of the universe. DOPs always occur, not special in that way, but the way this happened is awesome. Because by process of elimination, well, there's very little to eliminate. You just made the bed, even if the penny was there, on the bed somewhere. You couldn't have made it, not notice the penny being there, on top, somehow, and then turn around and, oh, now you notice it. There's no way. It literally wasn't there until you looked. And yes, it is like Schrodinger's cat, the whole quantum state where things both are and aren't until observed. I think that relates. That's like how the simulation processes reality for us. It's not really rendered fully, at least, until we observe it, or there is some observer involved. But I think what happens is just the code for different objects is corrupted and isn't rendered back in for some reason. Now, what corrupts it, I don't know. Like any computer program, if this is a simulation, which I think it is, there's going to be errors. Those errors probably are fixed very easily most of the time without us noticing anything wrong, but sometimes they aren't. It's almost like the body's correcting for cancer, or 99.99% of the time, where there's a cancerous cell developing, your body eliminates it no problem. Which I think most people don't realize that. This is kind of a tangent. I don't even know where I'm going, but the body can correct errors, genetic errors, informational errors, which is really what it is in the end, very easily. But it's just that 0.001% where they can't correct it, they miss it, and then it grows out of control. DOP is like the universe's cancer. Thankfully, it never grows too large. Maybe those black dots are where the corruption is so intense it didn't catch it initially and it's grown out of control. But even then, it doesn't seem like there's a giant black dot somewhere swallowing the whole universe, so hopefully that stays that way. Case file number 3032, written by Little Spawning Flower. A hug made of diamonds. My husband bought me a pair of diamond earrings. Small hinged hoops, maybe just under the size of a nickel, with pave diamonds on the front half. Not too ostentatious or flashy, but just sparkly enough that they felt special. And the best part was they were comfortable enough to sleep in, with a hinge that snapped securely shut. I'd been saving them for a special occasion, but then I thought, we've both worked hard all our lives and earned what we have, and it was silly to save something instead of wearing it and enjoying it. So I wore them. I had been wearing them for a couple of weeks until one afternoon when I absentmindedly reached up and touched my ears and an earring was missing. I swear I felt my soul leave my body. I'd been outside doing yard work, so I went out and got down on my hands and knees, looking through the grass. I looked all the way through the house. I removed the pillows and peeled the bedding back, looking and carefully running my hand over the sheets to feel for it. I got down on the floor with a flashlight to search the carpet next to the bed, and nothing. I was heartbroken, trying to figure out how the hell to tell my husband that I'd lost one of the earrings, and beating myself up. Who do you think you are so fancy that you get to wear diamond earrings to do gardening? I came out of the bathroom dejectedly, only to see the missing earring on the stool next to the bed, which I had moved and stood on to check the floor. I don't even know how long I stood there with my mouth hanging open, but there it was. It was absolutely surreal, and it felt like a hug from the universe. Case file number 3033, written by Cailloutex15, The Smile Beyond Time. I had a dream about my grandfather I never got to meet. In my dream, the weather was beautiful. Warm, sunny, yet with a nice bit of clouds. There were all these things outside that I was sorting through to throw away. I was fixated on a pair of light brown, leathery type sandals think Mexican-style sandals, on a shoe rack. As I'm contemplating, I turned around and there was my grandpa. He was in a black linen suit and white shirt all nicely pressed. His salt and pepper hair kinda slicked and brushed back and his hands behind his back. Maybe looking about 50 years old, a smile on his face. In English he said, "Please don't throw them away, I bought them for you." I woke up from my dream feeling like I was going to cry, and yet so confused. My family is Mexican and didn't move here until my mom did, so how could my grandfather talk to me in English? How could I know it was him immediately when I've only seen him in 2 aging pictures? I told my mom about it, and a few days later she called me. Apparently she told my grandma about my dream, and my uncle who takes care of her overheard it. He told her that those sandals did exist. He said when he was a kid, him and his dad were going through the market and he pointed those sandals out to his dad. The sandals were too small for him or his younger siblings. He said they started walking away, but his dad turned around and bought those shoes. No one ever wore them, and he had no idea what happened to them in the end. She also told me my grandfather knew English very well and would have full-out conversations with people. The outfit I dreamt him in was his favorite outfit to wear. To say my family and I were in disbelief is an understatement. I had gone to Mexico to visit my grandmother a few months before. She is in failing health, and I just felt like I had to go before I regretted it for the rest of my life. She was like my second mom while we still lived there. My mom thinks that it was my grandpa's way of thanking me for seeing his wife that he loves so much. I wish I could have met him alive, but even if it was just a dream, I'm so happy to have met him once. All I can say to this one is that it's a heartfelt story, and I love stories that connect with your heart. It's great. Case file number 3034, written by Sweet Focus 5998. The Cartoons, the Divine, and the Silence Between. I have found the best conversations I've had were with people whom I didn't share their language. So I don't speak a word of Arabic, but I met my friend's dad in her country. He told me his whole life story, and I was really looking forward to talking to him more when she told me a few years after I met him that he'd be visiting her in the US. I had all these questions about his early life that were kind of specific and related to what I was doing at the time. My friend looked at me, confused, and said, "You know he doesn't speak a word of English, right? He's not going to be able to understand what you're asking." I was so confused because I remember him telling me about his wedding night, being forced to march out of his first and second home, really emotional stories. Another time also happened to be with an Arabic-speaking guy. I was in Egypt and, long story short, was stuck at a house party with some Egyptian Americans. I didn't really know them well and didn't feel like socializing with them. I sat next to some Egyptian guy who was kinda being ignored by the group because he was a little weird, according to them anyways, had some sort of learning disability. Realized he didn't speak a word of English, and I don't speak a word of Arabic, but we somehow got talking about how his mother taught him elementary French as a kid, which I knew a few words of from studying it in middle school 15 years ago. From there, we talked in depth about his work as a cartoonist, his art, and the portrayal of the divine feminine in Orthodox Christianity, and how his art explores their role in the current church. Great conversation, and I didn't realize it was odd until I got up to refill my drink, and the host pulled me aside incredibly confused as to how we were talking for over an hour in some intense conversation when she knew we didn't speak each other's language. I think a lot more is communicated through means other than spoken language than most of us acknowledge. So I've never had this happen to me, where there's a language barrier and I can still really understand and process what someone else is saying. But I just want to piggyback on the last line where nonverbal communication is very intense, and probably why I don't like talking to people over the phone. You don't get the full experience. Something is so hollow and missing. Now, when you're just watching a YouTube video, it probably still feels the same way, but you still have, face. I think this is why I always want to do these notes on camera, where it's not as important for the stories, but I think if it's my personal opinions, then seeing my face can help connect more. So if you're talking on FaceTime or something, that's better. At least it bridges the gap a bit more. But yeah, if it's just voice and you're trying to connect on a personal level, it's just something's missing, you know? So yeah, Body language, facial, animation matters a lot. Although I don't think that's quite enough to explain what happened here. There's definitely some telepathy going on. Case file number 3035, written by Horror Desk. Sunday Horror. I was living in a university town noted for its party culture in a particularly rowdy apartment block. Our neighbors would sometimes drunkenly knock on our door in the early hours to borrow aspirin, continue the party, or just to be annoying. I was so used to it that it barely woke me up after a while. Until one Sunday at around 5 a.m. when I suddenly awoke to a noise that made my blood run cold. It wasn't just the usual drunken knocks and slurred shouting. It was an urgent, violent, desperate hammering on the other side. I froze and lay paralyzed in bed. After about 5 minutes, the noise stopped abruptly. My boyfriend, who had somehow slept through this, dismissed it as a dream or our neighbors wanting to freak us out. I go about my Sunday, doing chores around the house, cooking, etc. I try to ignore my sense of unease. At around 5 p.m., I leave the apartment for my first time to take out the trash. Outside in the corridor, leading up to my place, are splotches of dried blood and bloody, muddy footprints. And on the door, bloody handprints. I asked around. Nobody else had seen or heard anything. Case file number 3036, written by Slow Caterpillar 2236. Cooking for no one. I work as a chef, and the strangest thing happened yesterday at the restaurant. During service, we got a ticket that looked really weird. One main course and one starter at the same time, and then another main course and another starter afterward. The ticket kinda just materialized. We don't remember which waiter called it. My colleague and I both looked at the ticket and talked about how strange it looked. We both remember it clearly. Then, after we'd cooked the food, the ticket suddenly disappeared. It wasn't hanging on the wall in the ticket holder anymore. We asked all the servers who brought it down, but every single one of them said they had no idea what we were talking about, and none of them had taken down an order like that, and we couldn't remember who brought it down either. The third chef working that day also said he had no clue what we were talking about. But my colleague and I are both 100% sure we saw the ticket with the order. We agreed on exactly what it said, we hung it up, and then it was just gone. None of the servers had written it, and no one knew anything. And we definitely didn't take it down ourselves, it just vanished. So weird. Now we're joking that it must have been a hungry ghost that placed the order. Case file number 3037, written by Baby Even the Losers. A small miracle on the nightstand. My son's glasses went missing once. They'd never gone missing before. He was like 11 at the time, always wore glasses, set them on the nightstand every night at bedtime. Nothing new happening here. Just one morning they weren't there. I found his spares, sent him to school late, and came home to finish tearing apart his room. I became frustrated because they should have just been knocked on the floor somewhere by the bed, but they were nowhere. I moved every single thing in the room. I stripped the beds even though I was starting to become unhinged, and even lifted every piece of furniture so I couldn't say I might have missed it. Every book, every piece of trash on the nightstands was inspected, moved, etc. I finally had to admit defeat. Sat down on the end of his bed, depressed. I asked out loud for whatever is responsible for returning lost items to please give me back his glasses. I stood up, turned around, and the glasses were perched on top of his lamp. This lamp was a cheap, wobbly piece of crap, and I had already picked the thing up when I was searching. There's no way they could have hung on while I was doing all that. I couldn't believe it. Within seconds of my asking, there they were. I even had to ask my son if he was doing something on the nightstand the night before and put them on his lamp to make space or anything. He said he didn't do that, but after he saw where I told him they were, even he was like, maybe I did? Because his brain couldn't handle that something supernatural had happened to them. Case file number 3038, written by Firm Chest 2946. My eyes passed over it. So I've experienced multiple glitches before, but this is my most recent one. Last night, I was waiting for my boyfriend to come home. His mother was also out grocery shopping, He told me to grab some Chipotle for us since he was driving from his out-of-state job. I got ready to leave, but I double-checked to make sure I had the apartment key before I left, since I was home alone. I had made a trip to McDonald's earlier that day, and I knew the key was in my hand, and I set it down somewhere. I check all the usual places, and it's nowhere. Now I'm turning over the bedroom and checking other areas. Nothing. At this point, I'm frustrated, but I remember I had an old key that got lodged in my car seat for months due to it being difficult to remove. Thankfully, I recently bought a cuticle nail clipper, so I used that and tweezers to pull it out. I came back home and started to tidy the room before his arrival. Still no sign of the key. He comes in and I welcome him. I was going to go outside to smoke, but I decided to ask if he wanted anything to drink from the store. I went to a QT down the street, and I returned to him talking to his mother in a room. As I open the door, I see the key lying right on the nightstand, completely unobstructed. I think to myself, oh, he must have seen it and placed it here. When I asked him about it, he said he didn't put it there. Confused, I thought it was possibly his mom. However, she also denied having anything to do with the key. So my confusion, after being absolutely certain it wasn't present earlier, was that it has to be a glitch. My eyes passed directly over that spot multiple times, and it's a shiny gold key that's hard to miss against a black nightstand. There's so many DOP stories today where they involve a nightstand. It's so funny. At least these objects are coming back. I'm noticing that DOP stories where the object doesn't return are becoming much rarer, so at least the universe seems to be picking up its slack and correcting its mistakes. Curing the cancer, so to speak. Case file number 3039, written by That Little Firework. The Man in the Chip Aisle. It was late, but I forgot to get chips for the work party the next day, so I went to the grocery store. I was a single female that lived alone. A man approached me in the chip aisle with crazy white eyes, told me I had a nice smile, and kept trying to get a response out of me. I walked away. I got to the self-checkout, and there his stuff was on one of the machines. He wasn't there. He was stopping across, looking up each aisle. He then saw me at the self-checkout and ran over. It was a race to check out. I hurried like no other, got into my car, locked the doors, and started driving. I noticed him running out of the store. I remembered to never let a creep follow you home, to instead lead him to a police station. But I lost him after my first turn and took a breath of fresh air. I made it home, parked, turned my car lights off, and sat there quietly and let out a big sigh. I suddenly saw headlights pull in behind me. He knew where I lived. He blocked my freaking car in. I was horrified with pepper spray in hand, thinking, if I gotta crash into his car, I will. I shrunk down, though, hoping he couldn't see me. I don't think he could. I could see his dark outline in the mirror, looking pissed. He peeled out, but then slammed on his brakes, got out, opened his trunk, and started rummaging through the back in panic. My dad said, he was probably looking for rope or something to break into your house. Anyway, he couldn't find what he was looking for and peeled away angrily at a very high speed. I called the cops and they came. They stayed with me a few hours and patrolled my area closely for weeks. I was too afraid to leave for days. It still haunts me. When you read stories like this, creepy events were almost half abductions, or possible abductions, like even before that, just someone interacting with another person in a store, like, I'm not against approaching someone. Like if you're a guy and you see a girl that you find cute, just, say hi, you're pretty, etc. Again, back to body language. Just feel it out. How does she feel? Look at her body language. Is she interested? Does she smile back? Not, step back a few paces. Just understand basic sociality. That's all. So shoot your shot politely. And if they're not interested, just say, have a pleasant day and go about your business. That's cool. Trying to press on forward and invade their space, or if they're clearly not interested, that's fine. Go find someone else, or just go have a meal or something, it's okay. I think there's just too much ego going on. I don't know. It's crazy. And yeah, going to the abduction angle is even worse. Like, damn. What is broken in someone's mind to try that? I don't know. Maybe can't be understood. Now time for the jokes of the day. I turned the Bunsen burner off, removed my goggles, and said, "What did you say?" to my wife. Wife said, "This is not what I meant by experimenting in the bedroom." I showed my wife my new tattoo. It's a spreadsheet tattooed across my chest. She said, "Oh, honey, you've excelled yourself this time." I knew a guy in high school who knew what every single symbol on every single world map meant by heart and could tell you immediately on request. Guy was a legend. Catching up with an old friend over dinner, I asked what he's been up to. He said, "Well, recently I've been abroad." I said, "Well, there's clearly more work ahead, because you look as manly as ever." Abroad. The CEO of IKEA was just elected Prime Minister in Sweden. He should have his cabinet together by the end of the weekend. I've never had issues assembling IKEA furniture, as long as you read the instructions. They seem to work fine. I think people they don't look at the instructions and try to wing it, which can be fun, but yeah, you'll probably run into issues where, why do I have 10 pieces and it's assembled, apparently? Alright, video up here, YouTube thinks you'll like it. Check it out. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe. See you next time.